The hospital corridor had never been this quiet before. 31 of the most respected doctors in the country stood outside a private intensive care room, their faces heavy with confusion and quiet defeat. Inside that room lay a man whose name controlled billions of dollars, thousands of employees, and the fate of entire companies. But none of that power meant anything now. The CEO of one of the largest technology firms in the nation was slowly fading, and no one could explain why. Machines hummed softly beside the bed, their steady beeps echoing through the silence like a ticking clock. Every specialist had come and gone. Neurologists, cardiologists, infectious disease experts, psychologists. Every test imaginable had been performed. Blood panels, brain scans, genetic analysis, toxicology screenings. The results showed nothing clear. The man was awake sometimes, unconscious other times, but always weak, always confused, and getting worse. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, 3 small children asked one simple question that 31 doctors had never thought to ask. But before we go further, if you believe kindness and second chances can change lives in ways we never expect, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in humanity, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. The CEO's name was Daniel Whitmore. At just 48 years old, he had built Whitmore Technologies from a small startup into a global empire. His face appeared on magazine covers. Business schools studied his leadership style. Investors trusted his instincts like a compass. But success had come at a price. Daniel's days had always been measured in meetings, negotiations, flights, and deadlines. Years passed with barely a pause. His wife had once told him that time was the only thing money couldn't buy back. He had laughed then, believing there would always be more time later. Then, 3 weeks ago, everything changed. It started with dizziness during a board meeting. At first, Daniel ignored it. CEOs didn't collapse in front of investors. He finished the meeting, smiled through the weakness, and walked back to his office. But by evening, he could barely stand. Within hours, he was rushed to one of the most advanced hospitals in the city. The tests began immediately. Day after day, specialists searched for answers, but every result returned with the same frustrating conclusion. Nothing obvious, no infection, no stroke, no tumor, no poisoning. Yet Daniel continued to weaken, his memory blurred, his hands trembled. Sometimes he couldn't finish a sentence. The hospital eventually assembled a special team, 31 doctors from different fields. Together, they examined every possibility. Still nothing. To the public, the story remained secret. The media simply reported that the CEO was taking medical leave. But inside the hospital walls, tension grew heavier each day, because when doctors don't have answers, time becomes the enemy. Meanwhile, across the city, a man named Marcus Rivera was having a very different kind of morning. Marcus was a single father raising triplets, 3 energetic 6-year-olds named Noah, Lily, and Mateo. His small apartment was filled with noise, laughter, spilled cereal, and the chaos that only children could create. Life hadn't been easy for Marcus. His wife had passed away when the triplets were babies, leaving him to navigate fatherhood alone. Since then, every day had been a balancing act between work, parenting, and exhaustion. He worked as a maintenance technician for a large office complex, fixing elevators, repairing lights, and solving the kinds of problems people only noticed when something stopped working. Money was tight, sleep was rare, but love filled every corner of their tiny home. That Tuesday morning, Marcus was preparing breakfast when Noah accidentally knocked over a glass and sliced his finger on the broken edge. The cut wasn't serious, but it needed stitches. So Marcus packed the kids into his old car and drove to the hospital. Hospitals were never quiet places, but the children were unusually curious that day. As Marcus filled out paperwork at the emergency desk, the triplets wandered close to the hallway that led toward the private ICU wing. A group of doctors stood there, speaking in low, tense voices. Even children can sense when adults are worried. Lily tugged on Marcus's sleeve and pointed toward the group. Marcus gently guided the kids away, not wanting them to bother anyone, but the hallway conversation caught Mateo's attention. The doctors were discussing symptoms: fatigue, confusion, muscle weakness. Children often hear things adults assume they don't understand. Mateo tilted his head thoughtfully. Then he asked a question that stopped Marcus mid-step. "Daddy, If someone is really tired and confused like that, did anyone ask if he stopped eating something he always eats? Marcus blinked, surprised by the comment. Kids asked strange questions all the time, but Mateo continued thinking out loud. Because when Lily stopped drinking milk last year, she got really sick, remember? Marcus remembered. Lily had once developed a vitamin deficiency after suddenly refusing certain foods. The pediatrician had figured it out quickly. It had seemed like a random childhood memory, but the nearby doctors heard the comment. One of them turned slowly. At first, they smiled politely at the child's curiosity. Then something changed. The chief neurologist stepped forward and crouched slightly to Mateo's level. He asked Marcus a few questions about what the boy meant. Marcus explained the old story about Lily's diet problem and the vitamin deficiency. The doctor's expression grew thoughtful, because in 3 weeks of complex testing, dozens of specialists had examined Daniel Whitmore's body, but none of them had examined his daily habits closely enough. Within minutes, the doctors were back inside the ICU room reviewing Daniel's lifestyle history, and suddenly, a small detail appeared. 6 months earlier, Daniel had adopted an extreme diet recommended by a high-performance health consultant. The program had promised increased mental clarity, energy, and productivity. Daniel had removed several entire food groups, including something critical, vitamin B1, thiamine. The deficiency was rare but dangerous. When severe, it could cause neurological symptoms almost identical to Daniel's mysterious condition. The doctors quickly ran a targeted test. Hours later, the results came back, severely deficient. After 3 weeks of confusion, the answer had been hiding in something unbelievably simple. Treatment began immediately. Within 48 hours, Daniel's symptoms began to stabilize. Within a week, the confusion started fading. Strength slowly returned to his hands. The hospital staff felt an enormous wave of relief. The case that had baffled 31 experts had finally been solved, and it had started with a child's innocent question. But the story didn't end there. The chief physician quietly tracked down Marcus before he left the hospital that day. Marcus was surprised when the doctor explained what had happened. At first, Marcus laughed in disbelief. His son hadn't meant anything serious. He was just remembering something from their past. But sometimes truth arrives in unexpected voices. A few days later, Daniel Whitmore asked to meet the family whose child had helped uncover the answer. Marcus almost refused. He felt awkward stepping into a world so different from his own. But the hospital staff insisted. When Marcus and the triplets entered Daniel's private room, the CEO was sitting up for the first time in weeks. His face looked thinner, but his eyes were clear. He listened carefully as the doctor explained how Mateo's question had sparked the discovery. Daniel studied the little boy quietly. The most powerful businessman in the room suddenly looked deeply humbled. Because after building an empire on intelligence and strategy, the solution to his crisis had come from a 6-year-old child who simply remembered a story about milk. For several seconds, Daniel said nothing. Then he did something unexpected. He thanked Marcus, not just for bringing his children into the hospital that day, but for raising them with curiosity and kindness. Marcus didn't feel like a hero. He was just a father doing his best. But Daniel had spent weeks surrounded by experts who searched only through complicated answers. A child had reminded everyone that sometimes the simplest questions matter most. Over the following months, Daniel made changes that shocked many people in the corporate world. He stepped back from his endless schedule. He invested more in employee health programs. And quietly, without publicity, he created a scholarship fund for single parents who were struggling to support their children's education. The first scholarship recipients? The future education funds of Noah, Lily, and Mateo. Marcus never expected his life to change because of a hospital visit for a small cut. But sometimes life shifts in moments that seem ordinary. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the clearest wisdom. And sometimes the people who feel the least important end up saving someone the world considers powerful. Before we finish this story, there's something special I'd love to ask you. If you're still watching, comment the word kindness below. It helps this message reach more people who need to hear it, because this story isn't really about a CEO or a hospital or even a medical mystery. It's about something deeper. It's about remembering that wisdom doesn't always wear a white coat or sit behind a boardroom desk. Sometimes it sits in the backseat of an old car, asking a simple question that no one else thought to ask. And if this story touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes the world still needs kindness, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the quiet miracles happening around us every day. Because the truth is, sometimes the people who change the world aren't the ones with power. Sometimes they're just children brave enough to ask one honest question.